Welcome to this piano accompaniment tutorial for the song You Say by Lauren Daigle, based on the recording from her album Look Up Child. This piano accompaniment arrangement is available at centeredworship.com if you'd like to get a copy of yourself and you don't have one already. Alright, looking at section by section, the first thing, and by the way, looking forward to what I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to describe some of the arrangement decisions that I made when I wrote it, just to give you some insight into the whys and maybe how you can interpret it, and then some tips for some of the more challenging sections, how you can master those, and then some creativity suggestions if you want to alter it, make it more difficult, make it more interesting, maybe make it simpler, just add some variety to it if you have to play this a lot. Alright, looking at the beginning, first thing I want to take notice of, the introduction and the verse is basically the same thing. You've got whole notes in your left hand, 16th notes in your right hand. Now, when you look at what your right hand's playing, it's just a repeated pattern. And it looks really easy when you see it that way, but it's not as easy as it looks. A very common struggle is for pianists is to play all of these 16th notes, because you play them quickly, to play them evenly and steadily. So a lot of times when I've worked with students, they'll play them unevenly, so one note will be louder than the other, and it might sound like, like if their left hand is a little heavy or their pinky is a little heavy. That's not what you're going for here. You want to keep them all even. You don't want one to stand out above the other. Same with tempo. You don't want to, you don't want to get lopsided in any way. That seems like a small thing, and you as the pianist might be marching through this and not notice those little things, but to the ear, the person listening out in the congregation, it's definitely noticeable. So you want to work on that. The best thing I can suggest is to just slow it down, take a metronome, and play it at a tempo, maybe even slower than that. Whatever tempo that you can play it evenly at. Play through it until you've got it mastered, then bump the metronome up a little bit until you got that mastered, so on and so forth, until you get up to speed. When you get halfway, well, I guess it's to verse 2, technically, I've deviated from the recording. In fact, I'll be honest and say I deviated a little bit already from the recording. If you want exactly what's played on the recording in the verses, you can find that in other places. I wanted to provide something that was a little more worship friendly, worship environment friendly, so it's very similar to the recording, but I think works better for a typical average church pianist in an average church worship setting. So it's just slightly different here. When you get to verse 2, it's a lot different because I added a melodic part in the left hand that sounds like this. Simple, it's not really super fancy, but let that ring out when you're playing it. Don't be ashamed of that. Let that, the right hand part's pretty redundant, so let the left hand part stand out. It works with the melody line, so enjoy it. Let that be a little moment for you as a pianist to in contemporary music that can be more repetitive, let it be a moment of interest for you. If, however, it proves to be a challenge to play that with the 16th notes in your right hand, or depending on whatever situation you're in, you don't want to have that melodic part in the left hand, that's fine. Just play the part in the first verse over again, and that totally works fine as well. One thing I did want to mention, whenever I play piano, I try not to let there ever be any throwaway notes. When I write arrangements, I think the same way. Even though something looks repetitive, looks like it's just filler, I don't view it that way as an arranger. Everything is intentional. Every note on the page was thought over and was inputted specifically, And when you're playing this 16th note that does sound very repetitive, the 16th note pattern, don't view it as just filler, as a robotic type part. Let it tell a story. So instead of just being robotic about it, be more interesting. Let there be ebbs and flows, something like this. And I don't mean ebbs and flows of tempo, I mean ebbs and flows in energy and dynamics. That makes sense? I hope you're able to hear those nuances in the recording. Getting to the chorus. Boy, I love this. I love jumping up and down like that. It's a lot of fun. So that being said, that this arrangement I think is a little bit more interesting of an arrangement for a pianist. You might find it a lot of fun because of that. But it also is challenging. You've got your two hands, when it jumps up to here, totally changing position, leaping up to notes, and then having to jump back down into its original position again. That's not a easy thing to do. That's a little bit more of an advanced skill for a pianist. So one thing, if it's easier, that you can do is just not let the left hand jump up. Just play the right hand notes. It still works, still sounds nice, still gives you what you need. You can always take off that last part in the left hand at the end of the measure. That's totally fine. I don't know that you want to get more complicated, more in depth than this. It's not really that difficult. Other than those leaps, it's not that difficult of a part. It's just chords. You notice that it mirrors the melody. You say I'm in. If you're working with a vocalist or a choir, whatever, and they want to change up those rhythms, you see that the right hand part, when it's mirroring the rhythm, matches the rhythms of the melody exactly. So if the vocalist wants to be intentional about changing up a rhythm and it clashes with what you're playing on the piano, then change up the rhythm. Say that they want to go, you say I'm trying to think of an example. You say I am loved. I made that up. Nobody would ever do that, but say they want to do that. That's great. Make sure your piano part matches that. And so as a pianist who's playing for a congregation or for a worship team or for a soloist or whatever, you've got to use your ear. You can't just play what's in front of you like a machine. You've got to use your ear. You want to make it interesting. You want to tell a story. You want to be listening for moments when you get to pop out and shine, but you always want to make sure you're supporting the singing. And that requires listening, and that's a tough skill set. When you get to verse 4, it totally opens up. The only exhortation I have here is to not speed up. That's going to be the temptation. You've been playing these 16th notes, feels like down in your gut like it's this really fast tempo song. It's really not. And when you get to verse 4, that's really where it shows its true colors as not being that fast of a song. And you've got to have the tempo in your bones, so that when you get to this section and you've got all this empty space, you're not rushing it. You're not shortening that space. The best thing I can suggest for mastering that, I learned from a drummer who told me to subdivide the beat to its lowest amount to smallest number that makes sense, which is typically a 16th note, which you've been playing already. If you have that pulse in your head, and you just ingrain it in your head, and then you get here, there's something about I think it's obvious. There's something about the smallest subdivision that's easier to keep steady because there's not as much space in between each beat. If you're trying to track with like da, 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 that's a lot harder to make all that space in between be exactly the same length in between each beat. So when you subdivide it like that, it's easier to keep yourself from speeding up. Alright, hope that made sense. This chorus is identical to the other one. You get to the end here, the end of the chorus, into this last page, and you get a... Boy, I'm not playing this very well. It's almost the same thing as the chorus. I'll just try to unpack this. Da 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 da, da 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 da. It's almost the same exact rhythm, just shifted into the measure instead of picking up the measure. That makes sense. Ways you can simplify that is taking out that cha, boom cha. Just take that out. Boom, ba ba bum, boom, ba 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 bum. You can maybe take the bottom note off of these if you want. I think you could even take the you could even take the bottom two notes off if that's easier. One thing I don't always mention in these videos, when you make a purchase, I do offer a customization service. So if you purchase this and you want to maybe alter the arrangement some, and you don't want to have to deal with a copy that you've marked all up with a pen and stuff, because that's just really confusing. You'd rather me come in, for example, and just delete those bottom two notes, make it easier to read, easier to look at, less confusing. I do offer a customization service. You can have me come back, alter the arrangement how you want after you've purchased it, and I can give you a different version like that. If that's something you're interested in, just shoot me an email. Either reply to the email after you bought it that you received from Centered Worship, or you can just email straight through the website. Alright, I hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching. CenteredWorship.com, again, is where you can get this, learn more information, whatever. Thanks again for watching.